Behind the golden gates of Beverly Hills, a brutal secret was waiting to explode. A wealthy family, a mansion dripping with luxury, and two sons who seemed to have everything. Until one summer night, they picked up shotguns and turned their home into a crime scene that shocked America. Were Lyle and Erik Menendez cold-blooded killers or broken victims pushed to the edge? This is the chilling story of the brothers who murdered their parents. It was a quiet Sunday evening in Beverly Hills, California, August 20, 1989. The elite neighborhood, filled with mansions and palm-lined streets, rarely saw police activity beyond the occasional car accident or burglary. But that night, the calm was shattered. At 11:47 p.m., a frantic 911 call came through. The voice was trembling, desperate, almost hysterical. "Somebody killed my parents! They shot my mom and dad!" The call came from Lyle Menendez, a 21-year-old, the eldest son of José and Kitty Menendez. When police arrived at the luxurious 722 North Elm Drive estate, they were not prepared for the horror inside. In the family's den, José Menendez, a 45-year-old wealthy entertainment executive, lay slumped on the sofa. He had been shot point blank in the head. Next to him, his wife Kitty, 47, was sprawled on the floor. She had been shot multiple times, her body shredded by shotgun blasts. The sheer brutality stunned the officers. Kitty's face had been unrecognizable. Bullet casings and blood covered the carpet. The sons, Lyle and his younger brother Erik, 18, were outside the mansion, crying, hugging each other, shaking with grief, or at least appearing to. They told police they had gone to the movies that night to see Batman and, upon returning, had discovered the carnage. At first glance, the scene looked like a professional mob hit. Detectives considered the possibility that José, who had business dealings in Hollywood, had been targeted. The boys' devastated performance only reinforced the idea that they were grieving victims. But within hours, a question began to haunt investigators. Could this really have been done by outsiders? Or was the evil hiding inside the house itself? To neighbors and acquaintances, the Menendez family seemed to embody the American dream. José Menendez had come to the United States as a poor Cuban immigrant. He worked his way up, graduating from Southern Illinois University, and by the late 1980s, he was a highly paid executive in the entertainment industry, holding top positions at RCA Records and later LIV Entertainment. His wife, Kitty, was a former beauty queen and schoolteacher. She had sacrificed her career to support her husband's ambitions and raise their two boys. They lived in one of Beverly Hills' most prestigious mansions, drove luxury cars, and mingled with Hollywood elites. Their sons appeared to have everything. Lyle, the elder, attended Princeton University. Erik was a skilled tennis player with dreams of turning professional. Together, they were groomed as heirs to their father's growing empire. To outsiders, they were the picture of wealth, privilege, and family success. But behind closed doors, shadows lingered. Friends noticed Kitty often seemed anxious, fragile, her smile thin. José was known as controlling, demanding perfection from his sons. The boys, though polite, carried a nervous energy when around their father. No one could have imagined that inside that mansion, a storm of fear, abuse, and resentment was building. One that would explode in a night of bloodshed. In the days after the killings, the Beverly Hills community mourned. Police launched an investigation, treating it as a possible robbery or mob hit. But soon, the Menendez brothers began to draw attention, not for their grief, but for their behavior. Instead of retreating in sorrow, Lyle and Erik began living lavishly. They bought Rolex watches, designer clothes, and luxury cars, including a Porsche. They spent thousands on restaurants, parties, and travel. Lyle invested in a restaurant near Princeton. Erik hired professional tennis coaches, resuming his expensive pursuit of sports stardom. Within 6 months, they had burned through nearly $700,000 of their parents' fortune. Detectives noticed this behavior didn't match grieving sons. Their story of going to the movies also seemed too convenient, as if carefully planned. Still, there was no physical evidence linking them to the murders. The two 12-gauge shotguns used had been purchased in San Diego under fake names. No fingerprints, no witnesses. The case stalled until a crack in their conscience gave detectives the break they needed. Erik Menendez was known to be the more sensitive of the two brothers. Guilt began to eat at him. He started seeing a psychologist, Dr. Jerome Oziel, hoping to unburden himself. During therapy, Erik broke down and confessed the unthinkable. What killed them, Lyle? And I shot our parents. Ozil's mistress, overhearing parts of the confession and fearing for her own safety, later told police. Eventually, the taped sessions provided investigators with the evidence they had long suspected. In March 1990, both Lyle and Erik were arrested. The media erupted. The story had everything: wealthy heirs, brutal murders, hidden family secrets. Overnight, the Menendez brothers became household names. But when the trial began, the narrative twisted in ways no one saw coming. In 1993, the trial of Lyle and Erik Menendez began, broadcast live across America. The prosecution's theory was simple greed. The brothers killed their parents to inherit the $14 million estate and free themselves from José's strict control. But the defense had a shocking counter-narrative. They argued the murders were not driven by money, but by fear and desperation. The brothers claimed that for years, their father had been both physically and sexually abusive. Erik, through tears, described how José molested him from the age of 6. Lyle said he, too, was abused, and that, when he tried to protect Erik, he was beaten and threatened. Their mother, Kitty, they claimed, was addicted to pills and alcohol, emotionally unstable, and unwilling to stop the abuse. The defense painted a portrait of two young men trapped in a household ruled by terror. According to them, the murders were an act of self-preservation. They believed their parents were about to kill them to keep the abuse hidden. Courtrooms were filled with gasps as these revelations came out. America was divided. Were they spoiled rich kids, cold-blooded killers lying to escape punishment? Or were they victims of years of horrific abuse, snapping in a moment of fear? The televised trial became one of the first great courtroom spectacles of the 1990s, rivaling later cases like O.J. Simpson's. The first trial ended in 1993, with jurors deadlocked, unable to agree whether the killings were murder or manslaughter born of fear. A mistrial was declared. But in the second trial's 1995-96, the atmosphere changed. The judge restricted much of the abuse testimony, ruling it inadmissible. The prosecution sharpened its argument. This was about money, control, and greed. They highlighted the brothers' spending spree after the murders. They dismissed the abuse claims as exaggerated or fabricated. This time, the jury was convinced. In March 1996, Lyle and Erik Menendez were both convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict shocked some, satisfied others. The debate about their true motives, greed or survival, was left unresolved. More than 3 decades later, the Menendez brothers remain behind bars, serving their sentences at a California prison. They are no longer the young, tearful men who once captivated America, but middle-aged prisoners reflecting on their choices. The case continues to divide public opinion. Documentaries, books, and TV dramatizations revisit their story, each framing it differently. Some portray them as cold-blooded killers, entitled and greedy. Others as tragic victims, silenced by a system that refused to fully hear their abuse claims. In recent years, with growing awareness about childhood abuse, some have reconsidered their judgments. Were Lyle and Erik telling the truth about their father's dark side? Or was it a desperate lie? The Menendez story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. How little we may know about the families living behind perfect facades. How power, money, and image can silence victims. And ultimately, whether fear and abuse can ever justify murder. What remains certain is this: the night of August 20, 1989, changed American true crime history forever. 2 wealthy sons killed their parents in one of the most shocking parricide cases the nation had ever seen. More than 3 decades have passed, yet the Menendez brothers' case still divides America. Were they ruthless sons who killed for money? Or survivors of years of torment who believed murder was their only way out? The truth may never be fully known, but their story forces us to look closer at the darkness that can hide behind wealth, success, and family walls. And perhaps the most haunting question of all is this: if everything looked perfect on the outside, what secrets could be hiding inside the homes around us?